I walked into my daughter's birthday party and heard my ex-husband tell his new wife, "The restraining order worked perfectly. She'll never see the trust fund coming." I froze behind the catering table with a tray of cupcakes in my hands. The venue was some fancy event space in downtown Portland that Derek had rented out for Lily's 8th birthday. Pink balloons everywhere. A Princess Castle bounce house. Tables loaded with presents. I had driven 3 hours from Seattle just to drop off my gift, and maybe get 5 minutes with my daughter before security escorted me out. The restraining order said I could only see Lily during supervised visits twice a month. Derek's new wife Cassandra stood next to him near the gift table, her hand on his arm, wearing a white sundress that probably cost more than my rent. She laughed at something he said, and I watched them through the gap between two balloon arrangements. Derek was speaking quietly, but I heard every word because the acoustics in this place carried sound weird. He said Lily's grandmother set up the trust fund before she died and made me the trustee until Lily turned 18. But the restraining order changed everything because now I have documented proof she's unstable. My lawyer already filed to have her removed as trustee, and guess who gets appointed instead? Cassandra kissed his cheek and said, "You're brilliant," and I felt my hands start shaking so hard the cupcake tray rattled. I set it down carefully on the table behind me and pulled out my phone to record, but they had already moved away toward the bounce house where Lily was playing with her friends. My daughter saw me and her whole face lit up. She started running toward me in her sparkly purple dress, but Derek intercepted her halfway. He bent down and whispered something in her ear, and Lily's expression changed completely. She looked at me with this confused, scared look, and then let Derek lead her back toward the other kids. I stood there feeling like someone had punched me in the stomach. The restraining order was based on lies. 3 months ago, Derek filed paperwork claiming I had threatened him and Cassandra, that I was unstable and dangerous around Lily. The judge looked at Derek's documentation, his lawyer's presentation, his witnesses, who were all his friends and colleagues, and then looked at me representing myself because I couldn't afford an attorney. The temporary restraining order got approved, and suddenly I went from having Lily 3 days a week to supervised visits only. I tried to fight it, but family court moves slow and costs money I didn't have. Derek knew exactly what he was doing. He worked in finance and understood how to manipulate systems. I had overheard him admit it, and now I needed proof before he stole Lily's entire inheritance. I walked toward the bathroom, keeping my head down so Derek wouldn't notice me. The venue had a long hallway with the bathrooms on one end and a small office on the other. I ducked into the office and found it empty except for a desk and some filing cabinets. Through the window, I could see the party continuing outside. I called my brother Aaron, who was the only family member still talking to me after Derek's campaign to isolate me from everyone. He answered on the second ring, and I whispered everything I had just heard. Aaron was a paralegal in Seattle, and he immediately understood the implications. He said if Derek was planning to remove me as trustee based on false restraining order allegations, then we needed documentation of his real intentions. I needed to record him admitting what he just told Cassandra. Aaron said to stay at the party and try to get Derek talking, but be careful, because violating the restraining order could get me arrested. I told him I wasn't leaving until I had evidence. I hung up and went back out to the party area. Derek was talking to some other parents near the food table. Cassandra was taking photos of Lily by the cake. I moved closer, staying behind a group of kids so Derek wouldn't see me directly. One of the other moms recognized me and her face went cold. She said something to the woman next to her and they both stared at me. I knew what Derek had told people, that I was mentally unstable, that I had made threats, that the restraining order was necessary to protect Lily. None of it was true, but when someone tells the same lie enough times, people start believing it. Security approached me 5 minutes later. 2 guys in black polo shirts with radios on their belts. The bigger one said, "Ma'am, you need to leave the premises immediately." I asked why, and he said there's a restraining order and you're violating it by being here. I pulled out my phone and showed him the paperwork. The order says I can attend Lily's birthday party, but I can't approach within 50 feet of Derek or Cassandra. I'm staying on the opposite side of the venue. The security guard looked uncertain and called someone on his radio. While he was distracted, I moved toward the gift table where I had left Lily's present earlier. It was a photo album I had made with pictures from when she was a baby, back when Derek and I were still married, and he pretended to love us both. I wanted Lily to have memories of when our family was whole. Derek saw me near the gifts, and his face went dark red. He started walking toward me fast, and Cassandra grabbed his arm trying to stop him, but he shook her off. He got right up in my face, violating his own restraining order, and said, "You crazy bitch, what part of stay away don't you understand?" His breath smelled like whiskey, and his eyes were wild. I held up my phone recording and said, "I'm standing here peacefully dropping off a gift for my daughter. You're the one approaching me." Derek grabbed for my phone, but I pulled it back. He said, "Give me that right now," and I said, "No, this is my property." The security guards were running over now, and other parents were pulling their kids away from us. Cassandra was crying, saying, "Derek, stop it. You're making a scene." Derek's lawyer appeared from somewhere and got between us. His name was Gerald Finch, and he wore expensive suits and had represented Derek in our divorce and in the restraining order hearing. Gerald said, "Ms. Kowalski, you need to leave immediately, or I'll have you arrested." I said I have every right to be here, and I'm not breaking any rules. Gerald pulled out his phone and called someone. Within 10 minutes, 2 police officers showed up. One was older with gray hair and the other was young, maybe mid-20s. The older cop asked what was going on, and Gerald immediately started talking about how I had a restraining order and was harassing his client and creating a dangerous situation around children. He made it sound like I had shown up with weapons or something. I tried to explain, but Gerald kept interrupting. The young cop finally said, "Ma'am, let's talk over here away from the party." He led me to the parking lot while the older cop stayed with Derek and Gerald. The young cop's name was Officer Davis, and he actually listened when I explained the situation. I showed him the restraining order paperwork and pointed out that it allowed me to attend Lily's birthday party. I told him I had recorded Derek approaching me aggressively and that he had tried to grab my phone. Davis looked at the video on my phone and his expression changed. He said, "Wait here," and went back inside. I stood in the parking lot shaking and trying not to cry. Through the windows, I could see Lily blowing out her birthday candles surrounded by all her friends. I had missed so much of her life in the past 3 months. Derek had convinced the school to stop giving me updates about her classes. He had changed her doctor and dentist to providers I didn't know. He had blocked my number on Lily's phone that he monitored. The supervised visits happened at a facility with cameras and a court-appointed supervisor who wrote reports about every interaction. During our last visit, Lily had asked me why I didn't love her anymore, and it broke something inside me. Derek had been telling her that I chose to leave, that I didn't want to be her mom anymore. All lies, but how do you explain parental alienation to an 8-year-old? Officer Davis came back out with the older cop, and they both looked serious. Davis said Mr. Lambert admitted he approached you first and that he tried to take your phone. The restraining order cuts both ways, so technically he violated it, not you. However, his lawyer is insisting we arrest you for trespassing and creating a disturbance. The older cop, whose name was Officer Raymond, said, "Here's what's going to happen. We're not arresting anyone today, but you need to leave now and not come back." I started to argue, but Raymond held up his hand. He said, "I understand this is your daughter's party, but you being here is causing problems regardless of who's at fault. Leave now voluntarily or I'll have to arrest you for refusing to comply with a lawful order." Davis looked uncomfortable but didn't contradict his partner. I got in my car and drove to a coffee shop 2 blocks away where I sat in the parking lot and cried for 20 minutes. Then I called Aaron back and sent him the video I had recorded. He watched it twice and said, "This is good, but it's not enough. We need Derek actually admitting he lied about the restraining order or that he's planning to steal the trust fund. I need to get him talking on record." Aaron was quiet for a minute, then said, "I have an idea, but you're not going to like it." 2 days later, I drove back to Portland and met Aaron at his apartment. He had brought his girlfriend Megan, who worked as a private investigator. Megan was in her 40s with short red hair, and she carried herself with confidence. She said she had dealt with cases involving parental alienation and fraudulent restraining orders before. The system was stacked against mothers, especially when the father had money and good lawyers. She had a plan, but it required me to do something that made my stomach hurt. Megan said Derek's pattern was classic narcissistic manipulation. He had isolated me from friends and family during the marriage, controlled the finances, and made me dependent on him. After I finally left him, he used the legal system to continue the abuse. The restraining order was just another tool of control. She said men like Derek always slip up eventually because they get arrogant. They think they're smarter than everyone and they start bragging about their schemes. We needed to create a situation where Derek would talk freely and incriminate himself. Aaron pulled out a small recording device about the size of a button. He said Megan had contacts who used this kind of equipment in investigations. It was legal in Oregon to record conversations you were part of as long as one party consented. I would be the consenting party. The plan was for me to reach out to Derek and ask to meet privately to discuss Lily. I would tell him I wanted to drop the custody fight and negotiate a settlement. Men like Derek loved winning, so he would probably agree to meet just to gloat. During the meeting, I would wear the recording device and try to get him talking about his real plans. Megan coached me on how to ask questions that would make Derek reveal information without being obvious. She said the key was to appeal to his ego, make him think he had already won, and let him brag about how clever he had been. I sent Derek a text message that night asking if we could meet to discuss arrangements for Lily. I said I was tired of fighting and wanted what was best for our daughter. He didn't respond for 2 days, and I thought maybe he wasn't going to take the bait. Then on Wednesday evening, he texted back saying, "Fine, meet me at Riverside Park Saturday at 10 in the morning. Come alone." I spent the next 3 days practicing with Megan and Aaron. They role-played different scenarios with Aaron pretending to be Derek. Megan taught me how to redirect conversations when Derek tried to deflect, how to stay calm when he said cruel things, and how to ask follow-up questions that sounded natural. She reminded me constantly that the goal was getting Derek to admit he had lied about the restraining order or that he planned to steal the trust fund. Everything else was secondary. Saturday morning, I wore jeans and a sweater with the recording device clipped inside my bra. Megan had tested it the night before, and the audio quality was clear even through fabric. Aaron drove me to the park and waited in the parking lot while I walked to the bench where Derek said he would meet me. He showed up 15 minutes late wearing running clothes and sunglasses. He sat down on the opposite end of the bench and didn't look at me. He said, "You have 10 minutes, so talk." I took a deep breath and started with the script Megan and I had practiced. I said I knew I couldn't win a custody battle against him and his lawyers. I was exhausted from fighting and just wanted some kind of arrangement where I could see Lily regularly. Derek smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. He said, "You should have thought about that before you left me." I stayed calm and said I wasn't trying to rehash the past, I just wanted to move forward. What would it take for you to agree to shared custody, or at least more visitation than twice a month? Derek leaned back against the bench and crossed his arms. He said, "You don't get to make demands anymore. You walked away from everything we built. You abandoned your daughter." I bit my tongue and said, "That's not what happened, and you know it." Derek shrugged and said, "Perception is reality. The court sees you as unstable. My lawyer has documentation of your erratic behavior and threats." I said I never threatened anyone, and Derek laughed. He said, "Proof doesn't matter when you have the right lawyer and the right story. Gerald made you look dangerous, and the judge believed every word. Now you're stuck with supervised visits, and I get to raise Lily my way." I felt anger rising but pushed it down. I said, "What about Lily's trust fund? Her grandmother set that up for her future." Derek's expression flickered for just a second. He said, "What about it?" I kept my voice casual and said, "I'm still listed as trustee, but with the restraining order, I'm guessing you're going to try to change that." Derek's smile got wider. He said, "Already in progress. My lawyer filed a petition last month to have you removed based on your documented instability. The court will appoint a new trustee, and I've made it very clear that I'm the logical choice as Lily's primary custodial parent." I said, "But you can't access the money until Lily turns 18. That's how the trust is structured." Derek leaned forward, and his voice got quieter. He said, "Trusts can be modified if it's in the child's best interest. My lawyer is already building a case that Lily needs access to funds now for her education and welfare. Once I'm trustee, I can petition to release money early with court approval. And judges always side with the primary parent, especially when the other parent has been deemed unfit." My heart was pounding, but I kept my expression neutral. I said, "So, you're planning to use Lily's inheritance for yourself?" Derek's eyes went cold behind his sunglasses. He said, "I'm planning to provide for my daughter using resources that should have been mine anyway. Her grandmother never liked me, and she set up that trust specifically to cut me out. Well, now I'm cutting you out instead. Every dollar in that trust is going to fund Lily's life with me and Cassandra. Maybe we'll use it for a bigger house or better schools or vacations. Whatever I decide is in Lily's best interest." I said Lily's grandmother wanted that money to go to Lily, not to you. Derek stood up and looked down at me. He said, "You're so naive. You always were. The restraining order was the key to everything. Once I had documentation that you were dangerous, I could use it in every court filing. Custody, visitation, trustee removal, all of it. You handed me the weapon when you filed for divorce, and I've been using it ever since." I asked how he got the restraining order approved if I never actually threatened him. Derek checked his phone and said, "Witnesses. Friends who were willing to testify they heard you make threats. Cassandra, who said you showed up at our house screaming. Documentation of your mental health history that Gerald obtained through discovery. It doesn't matter that most of it was exaggerated or taken out of context. It only matters what the judge believes." I felt sick but kept recording. I said, "So you lied to the court?" Derek shrugged and said I presented information in a way that supported my case. "That's what lawyers do. You should have hired better representation instead of trying to do it yourself." He started walking away, and I called after him asking when I could see Lily next. He turned back and said, "The next supervised visit is scheduled for 2 weeks from now, but I'm thinking about canceling it. Lily's been upset after these visits, and her therapist thinks limiting contact with you might be healthier. I'll let you know." Then he jogged off across the park, leaving me sitting on the bench. I stayed there for 5 minutes, making sure Derek was really gone before walking back to the parking lot. Aaron saw my face and immediately asked if it worked. I nodded, and we drove back to his apartment where Megan was waiting. She downloaded the audio file, and we listened to it twice. Megan's smile got bigger with each admission Derek made. She said this is exactly what we needed. He admitted to lying about threats, manipulating witnesses, exaggerating evidence, and planning to misuse the trust fund. She made copies of the recording and backed it up to 3 different cloud storage accounts. Then she sat down with Aaron and they started drafting legal documents. I asked what happened next, and Megan explained that we needed to file an emergency motion with the court to dissolve the restraining order based on new evidence. We would also file a complaint with the Oregon State Bar against Gerald Finch for suborning perjury if he knowingly presented false testimony. And we would send the recording to the judge handling the trust fund case. Aaron said his boss at the law firm where he worked had agreed to help. Her name was Diana Rothman, and she specialized in family law and cases involving domestic abuse through legal system manipulation. She had a reputation for taking on difficult cases and winning. Diana agreed to represent me pro bono after hearing the recording. Monday morning, Diana filed the emergency motion in family court. The motion included a transcript of my recording with Derek, my testimony about what had happened, and a request for immediate modification of the custody arrangement. Diana also filed a formal complaint against Gerald Finch with the state bar. She sent copies of everything to Derek's lawyer with a cover letter saying we would be pursuing criminal charges for fraud and perjury if they didn't withdraw all pending actions immediately. Derek's response came 3 hours later. Gerald called Diana's office and she put him on speakerphone so I could listen. Gerald said the recording was obtained illegally and would never be admissible in court. Diana laughed and said Oregon is a one-party consent state, and my client was part of the conversation, so the recording is completely legal. Gerald's voice got tight and he said the recording was taken out of context. Diana said then you'll have a chance to explain that context to the judge at the emergency hearing scheduled for tomorrow morning. Gerald started blustering about needing more time to prepare, but Diana cut him off. She said you had plenty of time to prepare false testimony for the restraining order hearing. Now you get 24 hours to explain to a judge why your client admitted on tape to committing fraud. The hearing was set for 9 in the morning at the Multnomah County Courthouse. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Lily and how Derek had poisoned her mind against me. I thought about all the lies he had told and how easily people believed him. Derek had always been good at manipulation. During our marriage, he convinced me that I was too sensitive, too emotional, too dependent. He controlled the money and made me ask permission to buy groceries. He monitored my phone and questioned me about every person I talked to. When I finally got the courage to leave him, he told everyone I had abandoned my family. He played the victim so convincingly that even some of my own relatives believed him. The restraining order was just the next evolution of his control. Tuesday morning, Diana picked me up at Aaron's apartment and we drove to the courthouse together. She wore a navy suit and carried a leather briefcase. She had prepared me for what to expect, but I was still terrified. We met with the judge in her chambers at 8:30 before the official hearing. Judge Patricia Whitmore was in her 60s with silver hair and reading glasses on a chain. She had reviewed all the filed documents and listened to the recording twice. She looked at me and said, "Ms. Kowalski, I need to hear from you directly about what happened in your marriage and why you believe your ex-husband filed a false restraining order." I told her everything. About Derek's control during the marriage, the financial abuse, the isolation from my family, about how I finally left when Lily was 5 and Derek immediately filed for full custody. I explained that the restraining order came 3 months ago after I started asking questions about Lily's trust fund. Derek told the court I had threatened him, but it was a complete fabrication. Judge Whitmore asked why I didn't fight harder at the original restraining order hearing. I said I couldn't afford a lawyer and I didn't understand how the system worked. I thought telling the truth would be enough, but Derek had Gerald and witnesses and documents that made me look unstable. The judge nodded slowly and said she had seen similar patterns in other cases. Men with resources using the legal system as a weapon against their ex-wives. She said the recording I had made was compelling evidence, but she needed to hear from Derek before making any decisions. The formal hearing started at 9 with Derek and Gerald on one side of the courtroom and Diana and me on the other. Derek wore a suit and looked confident. Cassandra sat in the gallery behind him. Judge Whitmore called the hearing to order and asked Diana to present her case. Diana played the recording for everyone in the courtroom. Derek's voice came through the speakers clear and damning. When it finished, the judge asked Derek if he disputed the authenticity of the recording. Gerald stood up and said, "Your Honor, this recording was obtained through entrapment and manipulation." My client was speaking casually and hypothetically. Judge Whitmore cut him off and said, "I didn't ask for your interpretation. I asked if your client disputes that this is his voice." Derek shifted in his seat and said, "It's my voice, but it was taken out of context." The judge asked Derek to explain the context where admitting to lying about threats and planning to misuse his daughter's trust fund was acceptable. Derek started talking fast, saying he was upset during the conversation and exaggerating to make himself sound important. He said he never actually lied to the court, and the witnesses who testified about my threats were telling the truth as they understood it. Judge Whitmore looked at Gerald and said, "Counselor, did you prepare false testimony for the restraining order hearing?" Gerald's face went red and he said, "Absolutely not. Every witness I called gave truthful testimony based on their observations." Diana stood up and said, "Your Honor, we have affidavits from 2 of the witnesses Mr. Finch called admitting they were coached on what to say. We interviewed them over the weekend and they were very forthcoming once they understood the legal consequences of perjury." She handed copies to the judge and to Gerald. Gerald looked at the documents and I watched the color drain from his face. Judge Whitmore read through both affidavits carefully. One was from Derek's friend, Nathan, who admitted Derek had told him to testify that he heard me threaten violence. Nathan said in the affidavit that he never actually heard me say anything threatening, but Derek convinced him it would help protect Lily from an unstable mother. The second affidavit was from Cassandra, who admitted she lied about me showing up at their house screaming. She said Derek pressured her to make the claim and she went along with it because she loved him. Judge Whitmore set the papers down and looked at Derek and Gerald with an expression that could cut glass. She said, "Mr. Lambert and Mr. Finch, I am considering holding you both in contempt of court for fraud upon this court. The restraining order was obtained through perjured testimony and manufactured evidence. Mr. Finch, you are an officer of the court and you have an ethical obligation to ensure the truthfulness of testimony you present." Gerald tried to respond, but the judge held up her hand. She said, "I will be forwarding this matter to the Oregon State Bar for investigation. The restraining order against Ms. Kowalski is dissolved immediately, and the custody arrangement is hereby modified." She looked at me and said, "Ms. Kowalski, I am granting you joint physical custody of your daughter, effective today. You will share equal parenting time with Mr. Lambert. I am also ordering an immediate investigation into the trust fund management, and Mr. Lambert, you are prohibited from taking any action related to that trust until further notice." Derek jumped up and said, "This is insane. You can't just believe her recording over everything we've presented." Judge Whitmore's voice went ice cold. She said, "Sit down, Mr. Lambert, or I will have you removed from my courtroom. Your own words on that recording were clear and unambiguous. You admitted to orchestrating a fraud against this court and manipulating the legal system to abuse your ex-wife. You should consider yourself fortunate that I'm not ordering your immediate arrest. The hearing ended, and Diana walked me out of the courtroom. I was shaking so hard I could barely walk. Aaron met us in the hallway and hugged me and said you did it. Cassandra approached us near the elevator looking nervous. She said she needed to talk to me, and Aaron stepped between us, but I said it was okay. Cassandra's eyes were red like she had been crying. She said Derek had manipulated her too. She didn't know the full extent of his lies until recently when she overheard him talking to Gerald about the trust fund. She said she was planning to leave Derek and she wanted to help make things right with Lily. I asked why she went along with the restraining order lies in the first place. Cassandra said Derek told her I was dangerous and unstable, and that he was protecting Lily. She believed him because he was so convincing and she was in love. Then she started noticing inconsistencies in his stories and realized he was using her as a pawn, just like he had used me. She gave me her new phone number and said she would testify about anything else I needed if it helped Lily. I thanked her and she walked away looking broken. Diana said we still had work to do. The trust fund investigation would take weeks, and we needed to prepare for Derek to fight the custody modification. But for now, I could see my daughter without supervision. That afternoon, I drove to Lily's school and waited in the parking lot. Diana had called ahead to notify them about the custody change and to update the pickup authorization. At 3 o'clock, the kids started pouring out of the building. I saw Lily walking with her friends and my heart felt like it would explode. I got out of the car and called her name. She looked up and froze. I waved and she slowly walked over with this confused expression. She said, "Mommy, why are you here?" I knelt down and said, "I'm here to pick you up because the judge said I can spend time with you now without the supervised visits." Lily looked uncertain and said, "Daddy told me you didn't want to see me anymore." I felt anger flash through me but pushed it away. I said, "Daddy was wrong, honey. I have always wanted to see you. I've missed you so much." Lily's eyes filled with tears and she said, "I missed you too." Then she hugged me and I held her and cried into her hair. We got in the car and I drove to a park near Aaron's apartment. Lily and I sat on the swings and she told me about everything I had missed. Her new teacher, her friends, the book she was reading. She asked why we couldn't live together anymore and I said, sometimes adults make mistakes and can't fix them, but I promised her that I would always love her and always fight to be in her life. She asked if I was still sick because that's what Daddy said. I asked what Daddy told her and Lily said he told her I was sick in my head and that's why I left. I said, "I'm not sick, baby. Daddy and I had problems and we couldn't stay married, but that has nothing to do with you." Lily nodded, but I could see she was still confused. Over the next 2 weeks, I had Lily for half of each week according to the new custody schedule. Derek fought it initially and filed an appeal, but Judge Whitmore denied his motion. Diana said the recording had destroyed Derek's credibility and no judge would side with him now. The trust fund investigation revealed that Derek had already started taking small amounts of money claiming they were for Lily's expenses, but the receipts didn't match up. He had used over $15,000 from the trust to pay for his wedding to Cassandra and for furniture for their house. The court appointed a forensic accountant who found all the discrepancies, and Derek was ordered to repay every dollar with interest. He was also removed as a potential trustee, and the court appointed an independent financial manager instead. Gerald Finch was disbarred after the state bar investigation confirmed he had knowingly presented false testimony. He tried to claim he didn't know the witnesses were lying, but the affidavits made it clear he had participated in coaching them. Derek faced criminal charges for fraud and perjury, but took a plea deal that gave him probation instead of jail time. The deal required him to complete parenting classes and attend therapy for his control and manipulation issues. It also prohibited him from filing any further legal actions against me without court approval. Lily started therapy with a counselor who specialized in parental alienation. The therapist helped her understand that the things Derek had told her about me weren't true. It was a slow process, and there were days when Lily would repeat something Derek had said and I had to gently correct it without bad-mouthing him. Diana said the best thing I could do was be consistent and present and let Lily see the truth through my actions. Aaron and Megan became regular parts of our lives. Aaron taught Lily how to play chess, and Megan took her hiking on weekends. Slowly, Lily started to relax and trust that I wasn't going anywhere. 6 months after the hearing, Derek requested a modification to reduce his parenting time. He claimed his work schedule made it difficult to care for Lily as much as the court ordered. Diana suspected the real reason was that Cassandra had left him, and he was struggling without someone to help with childcare. Judge Whitmore granted the modification, but warned Derek that he was demonstrating a pattern of putting his own interests above his daughter's needs. I ended up with Lily 70% of the time, and Derek had her every other weekend. It wasn't perfect, but it was better than the twice-monthly supervised visits that had nearly destroyed my relationship with my daughter. 1 year after the birthday party where I overheard Derek's plan, I took Lily to visit her grandmother's grave. We brought flowers, and Lily traced her fingers over the letters carved in the stone. She asked if Grandma was watching us from heaven, and I said I believed she was. Lily said she was glad I was her mom and that she didn't believe Daddy's lies anymore. We sat in the grass, and I told her about the trust fund her grandmother had set up and how it was safe now for when she was older. Lily said she wanted to use some of the money to go to college and become a veterinarian. I said her grandmother would have loved that. On the drive home, Lily fell asleep in the backseat, and I looked at her in the rearview mirror, feeling grateful for everything we had survived. The recording I made that day in the park had saved us both. Without it, Derek would have successfully stolen Lily's inheritance and permanently damaged my relationship with my daughter. Now Lily was thriving in school, laughing more, and starting to trust that I would always be there. Derek had lost almost everything through his own arrogance and manipulation, but Lily and I had gained our lives back. If you enjoyed this, you'll definitely want to see the next ones too. So subscribe now and let me know your take in the comments.